My message to my colleagues is simple. If you don't support Netanyahu, if you're disgusted by the countless videos of lifeless children pulled out of the rubble, if you actually believe in upholding human rights and international law, vote no on a blank check to Netanyahu's genocide.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I would say the folks that believe in genocide is Hamas. I yield to the gentleman from Florida, the chairman of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, Mr. Diaz-Balart, 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Let me first thank the gentleman from California, Chairman Calvert, for his leadership in drafting this critical bill, along with the Chairwoman Kay Granger, and the leadership for bringing this forward. As Mr. Calvert just said, yes, there has been genocide, but the genocide has been from Hamas, And if the world needed yet another reminder of the importance of Israel as a safe haven for the Jewish people, then the attacks of October 7th should be that wake-up call. This is not that complicated. I've been disgusted and shocked by some of the things that we've been hearing, including the sheer glee and displayed in celebrations across, even in this country, because of the murders of October. And remember, those grotesque celebrations and demonstrations happened before Israel even began its military action to defend Israelis, again in Gaza. So let's be clear. Those demonstrations, those statements, those celebrations were and are in favor of the terrorist group Hamas. The despicable anti-Semitism, which has been dramatically increased since October 7th, that we've even seen here sometimes on this floor, has to be condemned and has to stop. Israel is on the front line in the battle against terrorism. The terrorism of Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, you name it, and all of those, they continue to await for an opportunity to strike at Israel, as they have, just like they want to strike here to the American people in the United States. Israel and the United States do not want violence. But the problem is that the terrorists do, and they are the ones who have killed and butchered and maimed innocent Israelis. Again, last November, the House passed another Israel security supplemental, which was fully offset by a rescission of the IRS funding, and that was the reason why the White House claimed that they opposed that bill. Well, now there are zero excuses to oppose this bill. This bill does one thing, Mr. Speaker. It provides urgently needed funding for our friend and ally Israel to defeat the terrorists that they are dealing with. The United States must stand with Israel and to eradicate terrorism. This is not that complicated. You can use every excuse in the world and again, with the purpose of supporting Hamas and justifying the murders. This bill stands with Israel. No ifs, no ands, no buts. I'm grateful to Chairman Calvert for bringing this important piece of legislation, and I wholeheartedly support it. I yield back.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, the distinguished ranking member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, Ms. Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the gentlelady for yielding and for her strong leadership. Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose H.R. 7217. The United States and the world are facing a very dangerous time, with the risk of being pulled deeper and deeper into conflicts across the globe. Meanwhile, millions of people around the world are facing violence, dislocation, and hunger. This bill really is not a serious effort. As the ranking member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, I cannot support a bill that fails to meet the challenges of this moment and abandons those most in need of humanitarian assistance. And yes, this bill undermines the United States policy which supports a two-state solution. This bill is a blatant political stunt that is dead on arrival in the Senate. And so I urge my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves.
Yes.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
May I inquire how much time is left? Both sides.
Gentleman from California has 30 seconds. Gentlelady from Connecticut has 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, who has the right to close?
Reserve the right to close. Gentlelady from Connecticut.
Yes,
reserve.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Okay, thank you. A short while ago, my colleague from Arkansas said it is our solemn duty to protect our allies. Indeed, it is our solemn duty to protect our allies. Our allies in this case are Israel, yes, and we support Israel. Our ally is Ukraine, and we need to continue to support Ukraine. Our ally is Taiwan, and we need to support Taiwan. We have a solemn duty, yes, to provide humanitarian assistance to innocent civilians. We have a solemn duty to protect our border. These are not the issues that are part of this bill. This bill does not meet those solemn obligations. My Republican colleagues do not want to help Ukraine or the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. They do not want to address border security. They talked about border security as being the key to opening up the door to foreign assistance. They said it in the White House. The Speaker did that and now has walked away from it. It is really a political sham. They do not want to promote humanitarian assistance and leave millions of innocent civilians without food, shelter, clothing. In a conversation with the director of the World Food Organization, Cynthia McCain, she said, and I asked about Gaza, she said to me, Rosa, these people are starving. It is a famine. And I believe that is as well in this process of providing assistance to just Israel and not our other allies, they do hurt Israel and isolate Israel. It is time for my colleagues to be able to, on the other side of the aisle, to put our country and our national security ahead of partisan politics. What we should do is to vote this bill down. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut yields. Gentleman from California is recognized.
The gentlelady yields the balance of her time.
Yes, sir.
I'll close. The gentlelady is correct. This bill is not about Ukraine or Indo-PACOM or some other things that I would love to have some discussions about in the future. This is about Israel. And I think my friends on the other side of the aisle know I'm not a cynical person. I went about this. I've been in favor of moving an Israel bill for some time, and now is the time. I think it's just simply the right thing to do. And with that, let's pass this bill. Let's support Israel, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7217? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is...
Mr. Speaker,
Purposes of the gentlelady from Connecticut.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. The motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1727 if ordered. Adoption of House Resolution 863 if ordered. And the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7217. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 1727 as amended, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar Number 297, H.R. 1727, a bill to amend the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal Development Act to extend the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal National Historical Park Commission.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. For what purposes, the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I demand the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
any member wish to change their vote?
On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 2, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of House Resolution 863 will now resume. The clerk will report the title.
House Calendar Number 60, House Resolution 863, Resolution impeaching Alejandro Nicholas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, for high crimes and misdemeanors.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed
Mr. Speaker,
to.
on
For what
that,
purposes, the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote. Does any member wish to change a vote? On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Moore of Utah moves to reconsider the vote on adoption of House Resolution 863.
The question is on the motion to reconsider. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and the nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7217, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 7217, a bill making emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the attacks in Israel for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
1 minute. Voted. Does any member wish to change their vote?
On this vote, the yeas are 250, the nays are 180. Two-thirds not being in the affirmative, the rules are not suspended, and the bill is not passed. For what purposes, gentlemen from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 999. Resolved that the following named
Ask
members...
unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purposes, the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of H-Con Res 84 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 84. Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for a ceremony to present the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops and the 31333rd Signal Services Company, known collectively as the Ghost Army, in recognition of unique and highly distinguished service during World War II.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Is there objection to the consideration of the resolution? For what purposes, gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of H-Con Res 85 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
Concurrent Resolution 85. Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for a ceremony to present the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the women in the United States who joined the workforce during World War II, providing the aircraft, vehicles, weaponry, and ammunition and other materials who win the war, and who referred to as Rosie the Riveter, in recognition of their contributions to the United States and the inspiration they have provided to ensuing generations.
Is there objection to the consideration of the resolution? Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. This gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection. This gentlelady from Delaware seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as I ask unanimous consent that I may hereafter be considered as the first sponsor of H.R. 793, a bill originally introduced by Representative Bill Johnson of Ohio to strengthen the American workforce for the purposes of adding co-sponsors and requesting reprintings pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 12.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The House will be in order. Would you please take your conversations off the floor? Purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks, and the chamber is still not in order.
The chamber is still not in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Danny. Okay.
The House is not in order. Would you please take your conversations off the floor? Thank you. Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Danny Kugler of Kersey, Pennsylvania, in Elk County. Danny currently serves as the City of St. Mary's Parks and Recreation Director and was recently recognized by Parks and Recreation magazine with the National Recreation and Parks Association 30 Under 30 award, young professionals leading the way in 2024. This award is given to young professionals who raise the bar for parks and recreation profession. Danny was selected from a pool of over 100 applicants and scored on the impact of the agency's community and service population, contributions to the professional development of the field of parks and recreation, and for innovative ideas, programs, or research in the field of parks and recreation. Danny was hired as the first year-round and full-time director in June of 2029. In her 5 years serving the St. Mary's area, she's established a strong social media presence and increased membership and program participation by 40%. She's also successfully increased the city's 15 summer-only program events to 45 year-round programs and events. This is the first time in St. Mary's history that its Parks Director has been recognized for this award. Congratulations, Danny, on this much-deserved recognition, and I look forward to seeing continued growth and development of St. Mary's Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, listening to constituents is the most important thing we can do. They're telling me back home about the burden of high cost. One constituent shared, I have to continue working even after retirement. My husband cannot afford to retire due to rising costs. I also have to assist my mom with her bills, which puts further strain on our finances. Too many find it challenging to make ends meet while caring for an elderly parent. Another constituent shared, my income doesn't cover common life. I can't afford decent housing, meats at the grocery store, or basic life necessities. It's harder now. Madam Speaker, Congress must take every possible measure to ensure that residents of Eastern North Carolina, rural America, and those across America do not feel the financial strain in their pocketbooks and wallets. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
And extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate James W. Putney, Jr., a veteran, patriot, and Grand Marshal of the 2023 Savannah Veterans Day Parade. Mr. Putney proudly led the annual Veterans Day Parade in Savannah, which is dedicated to celebrating America's heroes. His devout service and leadership have been evident since answering the call to join the United States Army at 17 years old. Over 2 decades of honorable service resulted in his retirement as a staff sergeant at Fort Benning, Georgia. In his military journey, James played vital roles as a construction and combat engineer. Post-retirement, he returned to his roots in Savannah, transitioning to a career at the Chatham County Courthouse, where he continued his service until 2016. Even in retirement, James remained actively involved in various local organizations as he continues to exemplify dedication and leadership to his community and to his country. Congratulations, James. Thank you for your service to your country and to your community. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the Black women who won big at the 66th Annual Grammy Awards, which were held in the heart of my district. Best Album nominee SZA came away with awards for Best Progressive R&B Album, Best R&B Song, and Best Pop Duo Group Performance. Victoria Monet became the third woman in 4 years to take home the Grammy for Best New Artist, following Samara Joy, who won Best Jazz Performance this year, and Megan Thee Stallion. At the age of 22, Tyla became the youngest South African artist in history to win Best African Music Performance Award for her mega hit Water, and Coco Jones came away with Best R&B Performance. Still, the biggest awards, Best Album, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year, are seldom won by Black women. As Jay-Z alluded to, a Black woman has not won the top prize, Best Album, in 25 years. I mean, how much lemonade do we have to make? And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise before the House tonight in support of the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. Israel has been our longtime ally, and they need us more than ever at this point. With the unwarranted, unprovoked attacks that happened on October 7 to many, many innocent people by the terrorist group Hamas and the others that they're surrounded by in their country. Israel's been under attack since the first moment of its existence in the 40s, but even going back millennia. Israel's a fantastic partner on developing new technologies, improved medical technologies, improved medicines, improved drip irrigation, and improved missile defense systems. They're a great partner with us, and indeed a shining beacon in the Middle East as a representative republic unlike any other there. Even Arab Israelis would rather live in Israel than in some of those other places because they know it's good there, they know it's right, they know it's just. It's our obligation. Indeed, it's our privilege to stand with Israel as an ally in their time of great need. So we need to get over ourselves a little bit around here and step forward and get this work done. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in absolute disbelief and genuine disgust with what the Speaker did tonight. He knowingly allowed a bill to fail that would have provided critical support for our troops fighting terrorism in Iraq and Syria and critical support for Israel. He did it because he wanted to embarrass Democrats. He also intentionally left out much-needed humanitarian aid for Palestinians in Gaza, essential support for Ukraine, and essential support for Taiwan. He chose this horrific, dangerous new brand of partisan politics over our troops, our allies, and millions in need. The fact that Palestinians need humanitarian aid, Ukrainians need to defend itself against Putin, and Taiwan needs support against China is absolutely of no interest to the Speaker. Representative Goldman and I attempted to amend this bill to include aid for all three, but we were denied. We will keep fighting to fund Ukraine, Taiwan, and humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza. This is what the American people want. It's what our global partners need, and it's what this moment requires
time has expired.
Of us. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia? Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise this evening to salute the long-storied career of Chief Bobby Hughes of the East Meadow Fire Department, who has been in the Nassau County Fire Service for over 40 years. He rose through the ranks, becoming Chief of Department from 1997 to 1998, instrumental in forming the East Meadow Fire Department Chiefs Association. He's the current band leader of the Nassau County Firefighters Pipes and Drums, who led that very band down Pennsylvania Avenue for the inauguration of President Trump. He joined the Nassau County Fire Service Academy as an instructor in 2003 and has risen through the ranks. And this week, he will walk out of the Nassau County Fire Service Academy for the last time as the chief instructor. He has made it a beacon of education and training, not just in Nassau County, but across the country. Madam Speaker, I join the Nassau County Fire Service in saluting Chief Bobby Hughes and thanking him for his career in keeping our county safe and training the future of the fire service. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to the ultimate sacrifice made by 5 of our nation's most heroic men and women in uniform. Each was defending liberty in dangerous territory, and each possessed raw courage, selflessness, and total dedication to duty for the sake of our nation. Each of us is privileged to live under liberty's umbrella because of them. Special Warfare Operator First Class Christopher Chambers and Navy Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram were lost far from home in rough waters on the Red Sea on January 11th. Then 17 days later, on January 28th, an enemy drone targeted Tower 22 in Jordan. The drone, operated by Iranian-backed militia terrorists, wounded more than 40 U.S. service members, killing 3 of America's finest, Staff Sergeant William Rivers, Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, and Sergeant Brianna Moffitt. While all 5 hailed from different hometowns, they served together for one united purpose: liberty, defending America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. These brave soldiers and sailors were guarding us against the hastening spiderweb of terrorism and tyranny halfway around the world. Let us pay homage and honor each of these young men and women for their ultimate sacrifice. May they rest in peace. May God bless America.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
For 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The skullduggery of the Speaker of the House was on display today. He has no real interest in helping Israel. He has interest in scoring political points with Donald Trump. And he used Israel to do that today, and he did it a month ago. A month ago or so, he said he would support aid to Israel if it was set off with $13 or $14 million in cuts to the IRS, which would have only benefited the wealthiest tax cheats in our country. To condition aid for Israel on helping out rich tax cheats is despicable. And the skullduggery today was to separate Israel from Ukraine, a country similar to Israel that's being invaded by Russia to try to deny its territorial integrity and to commit a genocide, just as Hamas is trying to commit a genocide in Israel. I support Israel. I also support helping with humanitarian aid the people in Gaza who have been hurt, injured, or killed. I also support helping Ukraine from having Russia do the same thing. And I support Taiwan. I do not support the Speaker. He is a man without good faith. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in praise of the resilience of my community in Southwest Washington. Last month, a fire broke out at one of 2 seafood processing facilities near the Port of Ilwaco in my district. In the aftermath of the catastrophic fire, the unity and support demonstrated by the Ilwaco community has been remarkable. Whereas lesser men would have seen an opportunity for competitive advantage, these folks chose to stand together and see each other as neighbors, lending out crab pots to each other that they didn't have to do. I am incredibly grateful to come from a community that supports each other in the wake of a tragedy. Their community spirit is a competitive advantage that money cannot buy and in natural disasters cannot shake. I extend my thanks to the brave first responders who responded to the fire. Several of them were treated for heat exhaustion, to their tireless effort in combating the blaze for hours. And I want to recognize the folks in Owako who stepped up to help local crabbers, dropping off sandwiches, shipping up crab pots from as far south as California and Alaska. And rebuilding and recovery will take time. They will never get back those hours of sleep or the heartache or the monetary loss. But their moral fiber has been revealed in a way that is durable and will strengthen the community and is its own reward. I stand with you in your fights, and I am so grateful for your leadership. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
The American people might wonder just what happened here today. Well, first of all, the southern border deal never got anywhere. And all of the logistics and all of the cloak and dagger and what was going to be in it failed to even get the attention of the Speaker of this House or any of the Republican members. And yet, all of a sudden, an unfounded legislative initiative that was allegedly to advocate for the needs of the people in the Mideast wound up on the floor of the House. You wonder what we did today. It wound up on the floor of the House with no conscience, no thought, no commitment. And that is why I was not able to vote for it. I was willing to join an amended initiative to ensure that all of the people that are in need in the Mideast would be taken care of, that we would have the funding for Israel, but we would have the funding for the Palestinians and the aid that is needed in Gaza and the ability to deal with the crisis of death that they have been facing, that we would have the money for Taiwan, and yes, that we would have the money for Ukraine. I've been to the border of Ukraine. I've seen the violence against our children. I've seen Russia steal children. I've seen parents die in the streets. It is necessary that we do this right, and that is funding for all of those that are in need, and do it now.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
In a professional way for the American people to know we care about the nation.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulniers, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to advise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, 6 years ago, I held a special order on a subject matter that I think is extremely important to this country and to the developed world, the issue of growing inequality. It's been 4 years since COVID-19 pandemic began, and it's more relevant now than ever because, unfortunately, it's gotten worse. The concentration of wealth in the United States of America is not fair, it's not American, and it is driving multiple social and behavioral health issues that more and more research points to and verifies. The pandemic has laid bare the deep disparities that exist in the United States and worsened the gap between the richest and poorest Americans. And it has helped eviscerate, in many ways, American middle class. The president has tried his very best, and in the 2 years the Democrats had control of both houses and the president was in the White House, we did much to begin to change this rising tide of inequality. Rising inequality incurs costs that harm us all, but not just those at the bottom of the income distribution. It hurts America. Next to me is a statistical diagram of the Gini quotient that's accepted by economists around the world as the best statistical measurement for inequality. And you can see, just since 1993, it's steadily gone up with the pandemic at the end. I'm pleased to have a couple of my colleagues and friends to be here to speak on this, and I'd like to Now, welcome the gentleman from Tennessee to make a few comments.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to join you because this is such an important topic and a topic that I've talked about for a long time. The income inequality in our country has grown and grown and grown. And the tax cuts of Donald Trump, which I voted against, contributed to it greatly. Tax cuts that gave the wealthy much more money, corporations and individuals, and did not help the poor and didn't really help the middle class much. My district is in Memphis, Shelby County and Tipton County, just north of Memphis. Because of that, I'm no stranger to high levels of poverty and inequality. According to the 2023 Poverty Fact Sheet by the University of Memphis, 21.4% of Memphians live in poverty. The overall poverty rate for Black and Latino Memphians is almost double that of white and Caucasian residents, roughly 27% for Black and Latino residents compared to 10% of whites. The child poverty rate is 32.7, a number that has been declining in recent years due to the child tax credits, but still far too high, and we don't know how much the child tax credits will be available to people this coming year. In 2022, the child poverty rate in African American and Latino communities was 3 times that of white families, 30% to 10. What hope does that give young African American and Latino children? The root causes of poverty often come down to access and opportunity. Childhood poverty is directly related to the financial status of the children's parents. Many young adults in Memphis have parents and grandparents who were prohibited from buying houses in certain areas, redlining, which is still a practice in Memphis and has been highlighted recently when one of the banks in Memphis was charged with such and pled guilty to such, I believe. And that has restricted access to home loans and mortgage protections as well. Because of redlining, many families did not have the opportunity to buy desirable houses. These policies were legal until 1968, so it's not ancient history. The impact of redlining continues as many families were unable to build generational wealth. Now poor families need access to services like citywide internet, subsidized child care, and supportive mortgage rates. And we've tried to do some of those things, but unfortunately it's not been a bipartisan effort. It's mostly been an effort by Democrats. Tennessee is nationally ranked as a low tax state, but that's not the case for the poorest families. The taxes are regressive. It's a sales tax dependent state, and that taxes the poor at the most regressive manner. The poorest 20% of Tennessee residents pay a significantly higher percentage of their income in state and local taxes than any other group in the state. Low-income families are paying high amounts of taxes while at the same time receiving lower levels of access to services and opportunities for economic mobility. Tennessee remains as one of the 10 remaining states that have not expanded Medicaid. That is truly sorrowful and immoral. If Tennessee were to expand, as 40 other states in the District of Columbia have, lower-earning workers would have access to affordable health care, and their families would worry less about the impacts of seeking treatment for an illness. $1 billion+ a year have been turned down by our state legislature because they don't care about taking care of the poor. Matthew 25 talks about healing. I saw people that were naked and I clothed them. I saw people that were sick and I fed them, and I saw people who were sick and I healed them. Some people say they live by the Bible. If you want to know where my politics are, just look to the Bible. Well, some of those people that speak it the most don't know Matthew 25. Measures combating childhood poverty and closing the income-wealth gap among diverse groups are vital in my district and hope to make more progress on the issue. I'll continue advocating for the child's tax credit, which Ms. DeLauro has championed, encouraging Tennesseans to expand Medicaid, and seeking additional funds for education and job training, and supporting other policy to help those in need. I thank Mr. DeSaulnier for having the moral courage and the will to bring this special order to the people that are watching. It's an important issue, and it pains me to see our country becoming more and more divided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I'd now like to recognize someone who spoke at my first effort at this, the very esteemed ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. DeLauro from Connecticut.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman so very much, and I so appreciate what you are accomplishing here this evening, is to shine a light on the issue of poverty in this nation. And you know, we have searched and searched and searched over decades for what is the antidote to poverty, and particularly on child poverty. And I'm often reminded, this might sound like a little nerdy, but you know, the Nobel laureate in economics, Joseph Stiglitz, once, and it's just a paraphrase, what he said is that inequality is not the result of globalization or modernization, but it is the result of policy choices. And you know, this body that we are blessed to be able to serve in deals with policy choices, which means that we can have a profound effect on poverty, child poverty, and reducing that in our nation. And I suppose I'll just reflect on, and I pick up a little from what Congressman Cohen said. You know, the House passed a tax bill last week that would continue to exacerbate child poverty in the United States. Public policy choices. So I want to say a thank you to Mr. DeSaulnier bringing us together tonight. And you know, as I said, and I so stated last week, in good conscience, I couldn't vote for a deal that was so lopsidedly benefiting big corporations, while failing to ensure a substantial tax cut to middle and working class families. It was deeply inequitable. We have seen the greatest rise in inequality, and we have seen corporations make super profits at the expense of the consumer. And so for me, it was a mockery of who representative government works for. Who are we here to support? The bill, it's massive tax cuts for big corporations, and it denies middle-class families economic security that they had. And we were successful with the American Rescue Plan. We were successful in having a child tax credit. And to be truthful, I started out wanting to make it permanent. I was told that can't be, it was too expensive, that it should be for 5 years. They said, no, it can't be for 5 years. Well, what about 3 years? No, it can't be 3 years. And they said 1 year. And I was asked, will you take 1 year? Of course, with the expanded child tax credit. $3,000 for kids, you know, 6 to 17, $3,600 for 6 years and under, monthly benefits for a family. And so I said yes. And then I was also told at that time, Rosa, once it is out there, it's not going to go away. It went away. It expired. And we had a chance last week to redress that balance and bring it back. And in my view, that was a missed opportunity. And once again, it is there, taken away, pulling the rug out from under working families, middle-class families, vulnerable families, and driving them into poverty once again because we reduced the poverty rate. That's what the bill did. And now it's gone from 5.2% to 12.4%. Hunger has risen, and it went down when we had the child tax credit. And the tax credit was the largest middle-class tax cut in history. Middle-class tax cut. So we got billions of dollars in tax relief for the wealthy, and the way I put it, pennies for the poor. That's what it's about. You know, and you want to talk about cost benefit? Returns $8 a child tax credit for every dollar spent. And we leave $1 trillion, child poverty in the United States costs us $1 trillion every year. And we would return 84 cents on the dollar to the taxpayer with the child tax credit. So, you know, it's a vast giveaway. Billionaires and corporations. just a couple of examples. Dish Network, FedEx, Salesforce, T-Mobile. They pay no federal income tax under the Trump tax law. You think about it for a second. Netflix will have a negative tax rate in 2024, 2025 because of this tax bill. That means that they get money back. They pay no taxes. And then on top of that, November 2023, they announced they would raise prices on subscribers. They add an extra $24 to $36 to what subscribers have to pay each year to maintain service. And yet, the same families will not see a child tax credit like they did under the American Rescue Plan. You know, it is absurd. Think about what people are telling you, my colleague in California and my colleague in Tennessee. Families today are living paycheck to paycheck. They can't, something goes wrong, they can't make a $400 payment. That's what's going on in their lives. They're struggling to put food on the table, to pay their health care bills, to be able to get child care, you know, and groceries have skyrocketed. It's all there. Child care skyrocketed. Corporate profits, though, $3 trillion in 2023. They're not living paycheck to paycheck. They're going to take that money and buy back stock, which is what they've done in the past with this thing. It is our families that are bearing the brunt of inflation and high interest rates. Child tax credit is the antidote to child poverty in this country. It's a successful tool that lifted millions out of poverty literally overnight. So, you know, what's happened, happened. We move forward, and we will continue to make the fight for a permanent child tax credit in this country, because we know how successful it was, we know what it did for families, and to the naysayers who said, one, we couldn't raise it to $3,000 or $3,600, and that we could never get it monthly, well, so be it. We did it, and it succeeded. And those who said that people are going to dog it, they're not going to go to work, they're going to buy drugs with it, they're going to, with data from the Columbia School of Social Policy that said people went to work because they could afford child care. And they were able to use this money for essential necessities, to buy those groceries. And you know what? Maybe for their kid, they could send him on a class trip or her on a class trip, which they weren't able to do because they couldn't afford it in the past. So it is the best thing that we can do to improve the economic well-being and security of American families today. Let's bring back the largest middle-class tax cut in the history of this country. I can't thank you enough. We need to continue to shine the light that it is our public policy decisions that create inequity and inequality. Let's turn that around and deal with the policies that do turn that around. And I can't thank the gentleman enough for putting together this special order.
And I can't thank you enough. You know, some people accuse us on the other side of socialism. You and I, who learned our rosary and our Catholic and Christian upbringing,
Amen.
It was about the social contract of St. Matthew's.
Oh, God.
And the Bible of, to those who much is given, much is expected.
Much is expected. Our Catholicism is rich with social justice. And I look at, in God we trust, and this body really needs to carry out social justice in a way that it doesn't do these days.
You can have individual responsibility in this country, and you can have social responsibility, that's right. And that's when we've been the most successful. When Eisenhower was president, when the middle class was strong, and the union movement was strong, and people got the GI Bill, and he implemented in his own way what Franklin Roosevelt put together, that's when this economy was the best. It was growing at over 6% GDP year over year, and it was benefiting everybody. And I'll tell you, one of the things that brought me to this was as a when I was a Republican restaurant owner, you would read in the trade journals about disposable income. And this is our friend Bob Reich's argument and Stiglitz's argument. If you don't have disposable income, it hurts everybody. Unfortunately, now people at places like the Roosevelt Institute, our friends, say that no, more and more, the top 1% is just selling to themselves and gating themselves off. And as Thomas Piketty has said, the inevitability in Western history, when you get to this level of inequality, is social disruption and civil distress. And if we don't fix it here, we'll have more of what happened a few years ago outside this chamber.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much.
I thank my colleague.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to go through my presentation, but I do want to thank my two colleagues. There may be one or two others on the way. I want to start by talking about poverty in America. I'm going to date myself again. Michael Harrington, The Other America, talked about poverty over 50 years ago, about how people in rural America were suffering. But we had the optics of how well people were doing in places where fortunate enough where many of us live. But it was rural America that Michael Harrington talked about. And again, he was talking about the social contract in the Gospel of Matthew. Nearly 40 million people, or 11% of the U.S. population, lived in poverty in 2021. 1 in 3 Americans live in a household making $55,000 or less. And while many of them are technically above the official poverty line, they're still struggling to make ends meet, that $400 in unexpected expense. In 2019, the U.S. child poverty rate was double that of our peer nations, including Germany, Canada, and South Korea. The relief we delivered to families during the pandemic made a massive impact on people's lives, including the leadership of Mr. Delora. The expanded child tax credit, which she mentioned, robust unemployment insurance, and emergency rental assistance all helped to keep families afloat during unprecedented economic hardship and an international pandemic. Now we're coming out of it, and those funds are going away. They did their intended purpose, but now we're at a tipping point. The expanded child tax credit alone led to stunning reduction in child poverty. This effort, spearheaded by my good friend, Ms. Delora, kept 5.3 million people above the poverty line, and between 2020 and 2021, child poverty rate plunged to 4.5 percentage points. As Ms. Delora said, they weren't spending this on anything but trying to survive, provide shelter, transportation, and get to work for their family and their kids. But after House Republicans allowed the child tax credit to expire, the poverty rate for children more than doubled from the historic low of 5.2% in 2021 to 12.4% the next year. If the child tax credit had been sustained at the levels from the pandemic, 3 million additional American children would have been kept out of poverty. 3 million. I wonder what they're doing this evening. According to the analysis of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, while the child tax credit in 2021, in 6 months, we reduced child poverty almost half. We know how to do this, folks. We know what works. We just have to invest and prioritize lifting up the most vulnerable people amongst us. And what will they do? The vast majority will work and be honorable and take that money for a very high return on investment for all of us. So wealth distribution. As you can see in this chart, data from the Congressional Budget Office shows that from 1989 to 2019, the total wealth held by families in the top 10% increased by 240%, from about $24 trillion to $82 trillion. $24 trillion to $82 trillion for the top 10%. While the wealth held by families in other percentiles increased far more slowly or even remained flat, wealth is skewed to the top of the wealth distribution in the United States of America. Families in the top 10% of distribution have held more than 2/3 of all wealth, and families in the bottom half of the distribution held only 2% of total wealth. I, like most Americans, want people to be compensated for their creativity, for their innovation, their hard work. But this confrontation, this distribution punishes 90% of the American public, and even higher when you get deeper into the numbers. The total wealth held by American families tripled from 1989 to 2019, but the growth was far from uniform for everyone. Over those 3 decades, 30 years, 3 decades, families in the top 10% saw their share of wealth increase by around 30%. For families in the bottom half of the wealth distribution, their share declined from 4% to just 2%. So even before the pandemic started, which we know has worsened this, the concentration of wealth among those at the very top has gotten significantly worse. This is not about class warfare. This is about fighting for all of us. This has been true in our history. When we went through the Gilded Age, similar thing happened. We got depression and 2 world wars. Who fought those wars? Who fought to try to get back so that they take care of their families? Not the wealthiest, but most Americans who are going out and working hard to get a paycheck. And as Mr. Laura said, unfortunately, history is repeating ourselves. And my fear is coming out of the pandemic, even with our growth, even what the president's done with unemployment at historic lows and wages coming up, it's not enough. We have to change this, and it should be on a bipartisan, analytical basis in this House and in this Congress. What we've done has had real impacts on those who are left out. It's not just that those at the top are better off than everyone else. As the richest among us are able to concentrate their wealth, they lock away their money in investments that research shows never get spent in the economy. Middle-income people spend their money. They consume. They go to restaurants. That's better for everybody. Wealthier people, research by Stiglitz and others shown, is generally retained in that group of people, and it's even more so. It's becoming more concentrated as they spend money amongst themselves and leave everyone else out. As inequality increases, it becomes more difficult for those not born into privilege to climb the ladder and build a better life, further enriching and growing inequality. This country is supposed to be merit and hard work and equality of opportunity. We're doing the opposite right now in this country, and it's because of policies here. Let's talk about worker compensation. This is not worker compensation as when you get injured, although that should be better. This is wages versus capital. Lincoln once famously said, when he his first address to Congress before the Civil War, when he was trying to hold the country together, he said, wages, labor in his word, and capital must always be equal and balanced in the United States. For if capital ever becomes dominant, we've lost democracy. Despite working harder, despite being more educated, despite being more productive, most American workers, their wages have grown exceptionally slowly compared to the growth in productivity compared to this CEO compensation. For the last 40 years, the gap between productivity and worker compensation wages has increased significantly. Americans are working in a more productive fashion. They're working more productively versus their international competitors, but they're not seeing their wages go up, and their disposable income sacrifices even more. A typical worker's wage growth has lagged far behind gains in productivity over that time. So it's the idea that if you worked harder and you were more productive, individual merit and responsibility is not borne out in the research and the numbers. If we look at this graph, we can see productivity has grown by nearly 62% over the last 40 years. But the average hourly pay of the typical worker grew by only 17%. This gap makes the difference between people being compensated fairly in their wages versus people who have the good fortune to be able to invest in capital. And this is what Lincoln was talking about. Put simply, workers are more productive than ever before, but are not properly compensated for it. Until the late 1970s, workers' compensation, wages, climbed together with productivity. But then it began to change and diverge. And it diverges when we abandoned the policies that prioritized spreading the benefits of growth to workers, to all Americans, wealthy and middle income, instead of what we're doing now. It benefited from a strong labor movement. President Eisenhower once famously said, "Only a fool would try to keep an American worker from joining a labor union. President Eisenhower said that. CEO pay, another contributor to rising inequality, is rising CEO pay. This is an ongoing issue, but it's something we've really seen balloon over the last 3 years. While so many hardworking Americans have struggled to make ends meet during the pandemic, some CEOs are making more money than ever. The average top CEO compensation in 2022 was $25.2 million, and it continues to increase even as low-income Americans and middle-income Americans are forced to make do with wages that year after year affords them less in terms of purchasing power. In 2022, CEOs were paid 344 times as much as a typical worker. The ratio of CEO to typical worker compensation was 344 to 1. In 1989, that ratio was 59 to 1. In the 50s and 60s, it was even lower. In 1965, it was 21 to 1. I've introduced the CEO Accountability and Responsibility Act, which would increase corporate taxes on companies with extreme disparities between their CEO and their workers' pay. We need bold proposals like this one to help put an end to runaway corporate greed and restore the balance of power back to workers. A balance, as Lincoln said. Stock buybacks. Over the last 40 years, tax laws, regulatory change, court decisions, and new corporate behaviors have led to shareholder-first corporations. That's the corporate veil they hide behind, where CEOs and managers focus on share price and investors, directing corporate funds to shareholder payouts. Corporate profits, or even corporate debt, may have once funded innovating new projects in research and development, and new hires and worker wages, or like the Germans do, reinvested in continuous training, back into community colleges and apprenticeship programs, for a lifetime of learning for workers, craftsmen. In the 1960s and 1970s, 40 cents were invested for every dollar a company earned or borrowed. But since the 1980s, invested back in their workforce, less than 10 cents of each borrowed dollar is invested that way. Instead, executives are using their profits to pay themselves and their wealthy shareholders. Over the past 30 years, payouts to wealthy shareholders have averaged 90% of all corporate profits. We need Robin Hood. This has led to skyrocketing use of stock buybacks. When companies purchase back their own stock from shareholders in an open market and reabsorb the ownership that was previously sold to the other investors, the use of stock buybacks was essentially banned, except under rare circumstances, until Ronald Reagan and his Security Exchange Commission. In 1982, a strategy for companies to artificially raise their open market stock prices and boost earnings per share. In 1982, during the Reagan administration, the Security Exchange Commission passed a rule that deregulated buybacks, allowing companies to buy their own stock without being charged with stock manipulation and incentivizing them, as Mr. Laura said, to avoid taxes. Where did those taxes go? Not to all of us, but back to the top 1% and their investors. Again, Lincoln, wages and capital should be balanced. The increased stock prices do not reflect an actual improvement in the processes of the company and may serve as a cover for financial difficulties in the long run. This is why I think Republicans and Democrats should be concerned, perhaps for different reasons and motivations, but the underlying rot in our economy is a problem, as exemplified by Thomas Piketty, and as he illustrated in his detailed history of other economies when this happened around the world. Stock buybacks are just an excuse for companies to reward stockholders and increase dividends while avoiding employee wages and compensation and investments back into their companies. In an investigation of 449 companies listed on the S&P from 2003 to 2012, companies used 54% of earnings to buy back its own stock and 37% on dividends of those earnings. The increased use of stock buybacks by corporations is a way that companies pad their profits and their mediocre corporate management and support their executives at the expense of all of us and their workers. Over the last 5 years, the top 20 S&P 500 companies spent a staggering $1.24 trillion buying back their own shares. Last year, Chevron, which is headquartered in my district, said it would triple its budget for stock buybacks from $75 billion, and Meta, the parent of Facebook, which is near my district in the Bay Area, unveiled a $40 billion payback. The Brookings Institute looked at the actions of 22 iconic American corporations, who alone employ over 7 million frontline workers, including the world's most popular brands in retail, delivery, and entertainment sectors, like Amazon, Disney, FedEx, Home Depot, and Hilton. In the first 2 years of the pandemic, they earned even more. In that time period, company shareholders at these companies grew $1.5 trillion richer, while workers got less than 2% of the benefit. $1.5 trillion and 2% of the benefit for their workforce. Doesn't sound like what Lincoln wanted. And they spent nearly 40% of their profit on stock buybacks. Rising shareholder payments are linked with declining employee compensation and increased income inequality. Gains of stock buybacks are also concentrated amongst the already uber wealthy. Around 58% of American households own stock. That's good. But about 93% of household stock market wealth is held by the top 10%. While our investment in good, strong pension retirement, and I'm proud to be the ranking member on the Health, Employment, Labor, and Pension Subcommittee of the Education and Labor Committee, those investments in everybody's pensions are good and benefit everybody. The problem is most of those investments are going to the wealthiest amongst us. And it creates the risk for all of us when this stops and it's not handled appropriately for everyone's benefit. An analysis by the Institute of Policy Studies showed that the richest 10% of U.S. households own roughly $42.7 trillion in stock market wealth, and the richest 1% own $25 trillion. The bottom half of households own less than $500 billion. Top 1% owns $25 trillion in the stock market. The bottom half holds less than $500 billion. Just 1% of stock market wealth. Sad. Corporations are spending more and more of their net incomes on buybacks rather than innovation and capital improvements and compensating their workers well for more productivity and ultimately more innovation and more disposable income for people like myself when I was in the restaurant business to go out and support those other jobs. Corporations are spending more and more of their net incomes or buybacks in recent years to enrich their executives and their shareholders, and it comes at real cost for their employees who have decidedly not seen the same kind of increases in their take-home pay or their disposable income or their ability to go out and consume and take care of their kids. Labor unions and strikes. Workers across industry are fed up with lagging wages and the benefits that are disproportionately given to the top 1%. This year, more workers are recognizing their collective bargaining power and are walking off the job or threatening to do so to fight for their rights. In Hollywood and auto factories and food service across the country, workers are fighting for fair compensation, safe workplaces, and job security. Public approval for labor unions in this country has skyrocketed to over 60%. Americans are waking up to these disparities and the unfairness and the lack of us supporting the American dream for everybody and rewarding hard work and responsibility. And then there's the outside influence of the uber wealthy in elections right here in this House. It's been a big issue in the United States and has drastically expanded since the 5-4 Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, allowing for independent expenditures. The Citizens United decision enabled corporations and other outside groups to spend unlimited amounts of money on elections. It opened the door to unlimited donations to super PACs, which function as a surrogate to campaigns despite being banned from coordinating directly with them. These numbers have skyrocketed. The impacts have been far-reaching and continue to get worse every election cycle. Billionaires alone provided 15% of all federal midterm election financing in 2022, according to the Brennan Center analysis. Just 21 of the biggest donor families, 21 families, each spent at least $15 million in one election cycle, or a total of $783 million in that cycle. $783 million. Do you see the connection between our policy and how people get here and stay here? The effective deregulation of campaign money and the expansion of dark money groups who don't have to disclose their donors are destructive to democracy. Clearly, Citizens United has helped reinforce the view that our government primarily serves the interests of the rich, all of our government, all three branches, all too often, and that there's no need for most citizens to participate in democracy. All right, those are the economic, social concerns that I have and what we're under. Doesn't sound good. Now there's more and more research in the connection to you as individuals in this country, to the people who despair, the so-called diseases and deaths of despair that are all too frequently in rural areas in the Midwest and the South regionally. But they're all across the country, including in the Bay Area where I represent. Behavioral health, substance abuse, opioid addictions have been well recorded by research and writing. This, to me, is where the tragedy of tragedies is far beyond policy. It's the reality of how Americans have to live, that $400 and the despair, the anxiety, and the distrust in this institution that is better than this, as my friend and colleague Elijah Cummings used to say all the time. We're better than this, Republicans and Democrats. So let's talk about health consequences of inequality. It's important to look at the effect it has on health physically and mentally and on the fabric of our society. Economic inequality is a cause for poor health. As one researcher said, English researcher said 20 years ago, inequality in a society are in lockstep with individual suffering. As the gap between the richest and the poorest Americans gets larger, the health discrepancies between these groups increase as well, and they're getting exponentially worse. As health declines, it has the adverse effects on quality of life, on our economy, on our workforce productivity, and our health care costs. Life expectancy in the United States has been declining for decades, and a lot of this is directly attributable to these diseases of despair. It has only worsened since the beginning of the pandemic. I thought we would come together, but instead it's gotten worse. There are stark differences in the average life expectancies of the Americans at the bottom of the income distribution and those at the top. While the health of the wealthiest Americans have remained relatively stagnant, while that of the poorest Americans has fallen significantly. Where in spite of the ACA, we're still spending the most as a percentage of GDP on quality health care. Unfortunately, if you're wealthy, even with the ACA, you're going to get better health care and a caste system of health care, which will cause your own life expectancy to go down. And this is a regional problem, and there's differences in a regional problem as exemplified by an extensive study by the Kaiser Foundation. There is a strong relationship with the level of income inequality and the percentage of population that suffers from mental health. So it's physical health, but mental health. The prevalence of anxiety disorders, impulse control disorders, and even severe mental health illnesses are correlated to inequality. Chronic stress or lack of social support increases the risk of ill health, both physical and mental. The CDC has recently highlighted the the outrage of the mental health of high school students, our kids, which is worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, more than 4 in 10 students felt persistently sad or hopeless and depressed. More than 1 in 5 seriously considered attempting suicide, and particularly for young women, as the CDC and the Surgeon General has pointed out to us. This is a crisis, folks. For all of us who are fortunate enough to have kids, we should be extremely sensitive to what we're giving as a legacy and the tragedy that we're committing to the future of this country and young people, irrespective of where they live or which party their families and parents are registered to. We should be doing a lot more to support mental health and behavioral health in this country, and that includes making mental health care more affordable and more accessible. Since the ACA in parity, there's been a 300% increase in people seeking out behavioral health. There's been a similar decrease in the number of young people going into the field because of the exorbitant cost of getting a degree. Talk about supply and demand. Social support and social networks are important for psychological well-being, both for individuals in this country, and there is a very tied connection. These are important determinants of population health, and they deteriorate in unequal societies. Aggressively targeting income inequality will lead to better health outcomes for more Americans. The same research by English experts years ago said that, again, the correlation between both, but they also said the remedy was not just more services. The biggest, most effective remedy is dealing with the societal, tax, and regulatory impact of this concentration of wealth and continuing to reward it. Excuse me just a second, Madam Speaker. So let's talk about global income inequality, because America, as bad as we are, and we've led on this